Hey everybody, this is GGB, and today we're going to be doing the Saturday. I love Saturday, guys. Honestly, Saturday for basketball, it's like, I know I'm going to be without this in like a month. I'm going to have March Madness, and then it's going to be like, no more sports until like August or September. So I'm trying to get every ounce of excitement I have left. I only got a couple more, I think only maybe one more Saturday. Might have a second one. Obviously, we'll have the ACC tournament, and I'll definitely have a more in-depth one about all the Power 5 tournaments. But today we have so many basketball games. We didn't have any upsets, which means I've already hit the 4-point goal, guys. So high five. I'm really kind of hyped. Did a great job. So these last games are just kind of fun. So let's talk about the Big 12. Start out with, we have many Big 12 games, 3 to be exact. 11 o'clock, we have 16-7 TCU, which it travels to number 7 Baylor, which is at 21-5. Baylor favored by 12 points on ESPN2. 11:30, we have number 11 Texas Tech, which is at 20-6, traveling to number 20 Texas, which is at 19-7. Texas favored by 3.5 points on ABC. And then finally, we have numbers 7 o'clock, we have number 6 Kansas, which is at 21-4, traveling to West Virginia, which is at 14-11. Kansas favored by 4.5 points on ESPN. So let's start with Kansas. Obviously, with a win or loss, not going to change much. With a loss, though, and a Baylor win, Baylor would move to 10-4, and Kansas would sit at 10-3. If Baylor, Texas Tech, and were all both to win, and Kansas was to lose, Kansas would still be in first place at 10-3. Both of them would sit at 10-4, but they would only be one game back in the loss column. Very close if you're Baylor or Texas Tech. Now, if Baylor was to lose and Texas Tech was to win, obviously Texas Tech moves to second place by themselves at 10-4. Baylor falls to 9-5 and would go into a tie with Texas. They would sit at 21-6. Texas would move at 21-7. Actually, I'm sorry. If Texas Tech was to win, Baylor would sit at third place. It's the worst thing that could happen to Baylor. If Texas Tech, Baylor and Texas Tech were both to lose, and Texas was obviously to win, Baylor and Texas Tech both fall to 9-5. Texas moves to 9-5 as well. Baylor would have the tiebreaker between those on overall record, and then I'd be interested to see how the tiebreaker works out with Texas and Texas Tech, because Texas and Texas Tech would both sit at 9-5 in conference, and both have a 20-7 record, and they would have split the series between the two. So it'd go down to the fourth tiebreaker, which I don't know what it is. I think it's strength of schedule, but I don't know what the strength of schedule will work out for either of these teams. So, or maybe it's points scored. Might be points scored, or it might be. I don't know. With a loss, so Texas could fall to 8-6. Not a big deal, because best case scenario for Kansas State is they win, they can move to 7-7. That's not going to be a whole big difference. Obviously, they would still be a game back, but Kansas State, you would love Texas to lose that basketball game, only be a game. Kansas State, a team that was a lot of people picked to finish dead last in the Big 12, could be in fourth place. It'd be pretty dang crazy. TCU, obviously, with a win, can move to 6-6. TCU with a loss falls to 5-7. Oklahoma State, I believe, does play soon, so 6-8 might be a little bit better than 5-7. If you're looking at it, 5-7 is 5 out of 12 basketball games. That's a 41.6% win percentage. This would be 6 out of 14, which would be a 42% percentage. So if Oklahoma State wins their big game against Kansas State tomorrow, then and TCU loses their game to Baylor, Oklahoma State would pass TCU and go into a tie with Kansas State at 6-8. So pretty interesting things there that can happen. But the big thing about West Virginia obviously with a win can move to 4-9. And Iowa State and Oklahoma. Oklahoma plays Iowa State tomorrow. So at the very least, if you're West Virginia, pick up a win, you'll pass one of those teams. You won't pass the other one, though. But you can move to 4-9. You're either going to pass Iowa State or Oklahoma. You will no longer be in last place with a win if you're West Virginia. Now, moving on to the Big 10, 11 o'clock, number 12, Illinois, which is at 18-7. Traveling to number 19, Michigan State, which is at 18-7 as well. Illinois favored by 1.5 points on ESPN. At 1:30 of Iowa, which is at 17-8. Traveling to number 18, Ohio State, which is at 16-6. Ohio State favored by 5.5 points on Fox. I believe that is it for the Big 10. Only 2 big games in the Big 10 tomorrow, so that's gonna be really fascinating. But Illinois with a win can move to 12-4 into a tie for first place, at least for now, until Purdue plays on Sunday. I believe Purdue plays on Sunday. Yeah. So Illinois with a win can move to 12-4 and at least in a tie for first place until Purdue plays on Sunday. If Purdue loses to Rutgers, they could move into first place by themselves. Illinois with a loss would fall to 11-5. Ohio State with a win can move to 10-4. You're looking at 10 out of 14 basketball games. That'd be a 71% win percentage. Illinois with a loss would fall to 11 out of 16, which would be a 68% win percentage. So with an Illinois loss and Ohio State win, Ohio State can actually move past Illinois for third place in the Big Ten. Obviously, it's what Wisconsin wants, so it would give them sole possession of first place in the Big Ten. So it's pretty good if you're the Badgers, pretty good if you're the Buckeyes, right? Buckeyes with a loss could fall to 9-5, which would drop which would move Rutgers into fourth place in the Big Ten, unless Michigan State was to also win against Illinois. That would move Michigan State into a tie with Rutgers for fourth place, and Michigan State would win the tiebreaker based off of overall record. Anyways, Iowa, on the other hand, Iowa with a win can move to 8-7, hoping for a Michigan loss. I don't believe Michigan plays a great. They play Wisconsin on Sunday, so you're going to be watching that game pretty intently if you're an Iowa fan. But if Iowa was to win this game, they could move to 8-7. If Michigan was to lose their game against Wisconsin tomorrow, they would also fall to 8-7. Iowa would win the tiebreaker with overall record. So it's a big game if you're Iowa against Ohio State on the road. Iowa with a loss could fall to 7-8. A kind of bad, horrible place to be if you're Iowa. You fall into a tiebreaker with Indiana. So that would be bad. And it would give Penn State, the team that beat you in double overtime, would only be a game back from. So if you're a Penn State fan, you are ecstatic. And it's the same with Indiana. If Iowa could lose this basketball game, because if you're a Penn State fan, this is about as good a reality as you could expect this week, beating Michigan State and beating Minnesota, both at home, by the way. And you sit at 6-9 suddenly, only one game back possibly from Iowa and Indiana for the 8 seed in the Big Ten. It's a pretty crazy spot to be if you're thinking about it for the Penn State team that was hoping just to get the 10 seed just a week ago. Anyways, that's what's going on in the Big Ten. With a Michigan State loss and a Michigan win tomorrow, they would both sit at 9-6 in conference and would actually be in a tie for 6th place. So anyways, that's what's going on in the Big Ten. 11 o'clock, Xavier, which sits at 17-8. Traveling number 24, UConn, which sits at 18-7. UConn favored by 6.5 on Fox. One more Big East game. We have 4 o'clock, Georgetown, which is at 6-19. Traveling to number 10, Villanova, which is at 20-6. Villanova favored 20 points on Fox. So, Big East. UConn with a win can move to 10-5. Again, not passing anyone, but it's more like not falling any further. I don't see UConn moving past the 3 spot, but UConn with a loss would fall into a tie for 4th with Marquette, which you would really love. But if you're Creighton or if you're Marquette for that matter, with a loss for Xavier with a win can move to 8-7. Not a huge deal. Still a game back behind Marquette, but you're closing in at least if you're Xavier. Marquette and UConn, you would have a season sweep over UConn, though that's a bright side if you're Xavier. Xavier with a loss would fall 7-8 in conference and into a tie for 6th place with St. John's. Obviously, that's what you're rooting for if you're St. John's. Villanova with a win can move to 14-3. That would have been 14 out of 17 basketball games, which would be a 82% win percentage. Providence sits over here with 11 out of 13 basketball games. I still believe that's a really good. That's 84. Oh, so even with a win, Villanova sits 2 percentage points behind Providence. Obviously, Providence would love a Villanova loss, as unlikely as it may seem, considering they're tied for the hottest team in the Big East with Creighton. They're playing Georgetown, the coldest team in the Big East. But if Georgetown wants to pull it out, they can move to 4-14. Again, Georgetown's just hoping they win a Big East game this year. I think that is the standard the Hoyas have set for themselves. They're not trying to get any higher. They're going to be the last seed because you're looking at their schedule down the stretch. They'd have to win 3 games and DePaul win no more, and you have a game against Villanova and UConn still on your schedule, as well as Xavier and Seton Hall. DePaul's your only game that you could consider winnable, and I still don't know if you can beat DePaul. So anyways, that's the Big East for you. It's not super duper complicated, but you're definitely going to be following things if you're different teams. If Seton Hall is to win tomorrow and Xavier is to lose, they could all enter a 7-8 tie for 6th place between Xavier, St. John's, and Seton Hall. Not to worry, though, if you're Xavier would have the tiebreaker regardless. But it would be kind of interesting if you St. John's and Seton Hall, if you could get it down to a tiebreaker. Moving on, we get some SEC basketball games. 12 o'clock, we have number 25, Alabama, which is at 17-9. Traveling to number 4, Kentucky, which is at 21-5. Kentucky favored by 6.5 points on CBS. 1 o'clock, we have number 2, Auburn, which is at 24-2. Traveling to Florida, which is at 16-10. Auburn favored 3.5 points on ESPN. And at 3 o'clock, we have number 16, Tennessee, which is at 19-6. Traveling to number 23, Arkansas, which is at 20-6. Arkansas favored by 3 points on ESPN. But that's it on that side of things. Let's talk about the Southeastern Conference for a little bit. Again, Auburn has a distinct lead on everyone, but Auburn with a loss could fall to 12-2, and Kentucky with a win and a Tennessee win could both move to 11-3, only 1 game back in the SEC against Auburn. So Auburn with a win or loss is going to be first place regardless. Now, on the other hand, you're looking at a Kentucky game. Kentucky's playing Alabama. Kentucky with a loss could fall to 10-4. Alabama would move to 8-6, not going to pass them. But Arkansas, if they were to win their game against Tennessee, you could end up seeing a 3-way tie for second place with Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas. Anyways, that's what we could see if Tennessee was to win their game and Kentucky was to lose their game. Arkansas would fall to 9-5, Kentucky would fall to 10-4, and Tennessee would take sole possession of second place in the SEC. Alabama with a win can move to 8-6, break the tie at least for now with LSU, unless LSU also wins their game against South Carolina tomorrow. That is a likely scenario, so don't expect it if you're to break the tie if you're Alabama. But if Alabama was to win and LSU was to lose, Alabama could move to 8-6 in conference and move into 5th place by themselves instead of having a tiebreaker with LSU, which falls LSU's way. If Alabama was to lose their basketball game, they could fall to 7-7, which could end up being as good as possible. Would be just 6th place. You would get 6th place all to yourself. As bad as possible, Florida, South Carolina, and Mississippi State all win their basketball games, and suddenly it's a 5-way tie for 6th place with LSU, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, and Mississippi State. Anyways, that's about as bad as it can get for Alabama. Florida with a win can move to 7-7, obviously. In Florida, you're hoping for an Alabama loss and I guess a LSU loss because you would win the tiebreaker with South Carolina. You would love to just get LSU even with you. Anyways, that's what you're hoping for if you're a Gators fan. Gators with a loss, so it could fall to 6-8. Possibly drop past South Carolina, Mississippi State if they also win their games tomorrow. Texas and A&M and Vanderbilt, if they win their games tomorrow, can move to 6-8 and into a tie with you for, let me count real quick. I got 6, 9, 10 into a tie for 10th place, actually 9th place with you. It's about worst case scenario though for Florida. Hopefully Texas A&M and Vanderbilt both don't win their games tomorrow if you're rooting for Florida. Anyways, that's what's going on in the SEC. Moving on to one of the more obscure conferences, the conference I probably won't be talking about in a week, but in Mountain West, 3 o'clock we have Airports, which is at 10-14, traveling to number 22, Wyoming, which sits at 21-4. Wyoming favored by 16 points on the MTN, which I believe is the Mountain Network. Wyoming sits at 10-2 in conference, 2nd place in conference behind Boise State. Obviously, Wyoming with a win can move to 11-2 and would pass Boise State on tiebreaker simply because they have the tiebreaker. They have the better over record at 22-4. Wyoming with a loss could fall to 10-3, and that could be disastrous for Wyoming because they would fall below Colorado State. Colorado State would move to they would stay at 11-3 for all I know, and would be only a game in the loss column back unless Boise State also loses their game tomorrow. They both fall to 11-3, and suddenly it's a predicament there at the top of the Mountain West. Air Force with a win can move to 4-10, which would pass New Mexico, which is at 3-9. Air Force sat ahead of New Mexico heading into this week, but New Mexico obviously picked up a huge win against Wyoming this week. Air Force with a loss falls to 3-11. That just means they're 2 games back in the loss column from New Mexico. That just means they're losing ground. San Jose State, I am positive, cannot catch up to them. So that's what you're playing for if you're a Falcons fan. Moving on to another obscure one, but, a good team nonetheless. 3:30, we have number 21, Murray State, which is at 25-2, the best record in the entire NCAA basketball. Travels to UT Martin, which is at 8-19. Murray State favored by 16 points on ESPN+. Murray State with a loss doesn't matter. They're still going to stay atop the conference, but their chances of going at large become slightly less. UT Martin, on the other hand, I don't see. Oh, Tennessee Martin, sorry. They could move to 5-11. Not a huge deal because even if Tennessee Tech loses their next game, they would be at 5-10. But you would be closing it if you're UT Martin. You would only be 1 game back in the loss column if that scenario was to happen. With a loss for UT Martin, they could fall to 4-12, which on the bat doesn't look bad because they sit at 4-11. The next team closest is SIUE, which is at 3-11. But if SIUE wins their game tomorrow against Belmont, which is unlikely, granted, they would move to 4-11 and could pass. They could pass UT Martin for. They could pass UT Martin for 8th place in conference. Right now, SIU East, it's at 9th place in conference. Anyways, that's what's going on in the Ohio Valley Conference. Moving on, we'll go to the ACC real quick before it does the visiting the West Coast Conference and then finally the Pac-12 Network. But in the ACC, we have Duke taking on Florida State. 5 o'clock, we have Florida State, which is at 14-11. Travel to number 9, Duke, which is at 22-4. Duke favored by 15 points. Duke favored by 15 points on ESPN. Duke, obviously, with a win, at least moves into a more comfortable position against Notre Dame. Notre Dame does play a big game against Wake Forest tomorrow. We'll see how that turns out. If Notre Dame wins their big game against Wake Forest tomorrow, they would move into a tie with Duke as well. So Duke, if you're watching, you're probably going to be watching the Florida State Duke game, obviously, but then you're also going to be rooting against Notre Dame when they're playing Wake Forest. So you're going to be rooting for Wake Forest there. Yes, Duke with a loss could fall to 12-4 if Miami picks up their win against who's Miami playing? Miami's not playing that tough of a team, I don't believe. They're playing Virginia tomorrow. So I mean, they're not exactly a cakewalk, but if Miami picks up their win against Virginia, then they could move to 12-4, and Duke could enter a conceivable tie for second place if Notre Dame wins their game. So worst case scenario for Duke, you're tied for second place. You would have the tiebreaker at 22-5. Miami would sit at 20-7. But anyways, that's the worst case scenario for Duke. Florida State with a win could move to 8-8 in conference. Conceivably, you could enter a tie with Virginia Tech if they were to lose their game against UNC tomorrow for 7th place in conference. Florida State would not have the tiebreaker in that instance. They would have a 15-11 record. Virginia Tech would have a 16-11 record. So they would beat them by 1 game in the win column. But that's not what you're rooting for if you're a Virginia Tech fan. Florida State with a loss. Worst case scenario, fall to 7-7. Best case scenario for Pitt is they move to 7-10. Pitt, weirdly enough, has become one of the hotter teams in the ACC. Didn't see that coming exactly, but that's the best case scenario for Pitt. If Florida State losing and you winning, you move 1 game back in the loss column from Florida State. Anyways, that's what's going on in the ACC. Moving on to the West Coast Conference, you have a big game. Obviously, win or loss, Gonzaga will be first place in the WCC. No doubt about it. With a win, actually, they lock up the 1 seed in the WCC, and you're just playing at that point to get the number 1 overall seed in the March Madness tournament. Santa Clara has not been doing that bad. This is a big game for them if they want an at-large bid. They could move to 19-9 in conference, and it would have a win over number 1 Gonzaga, which would be a huge. Outside of, in conference, they could move to 9-4, and with a St. Mary's loss, which they play BYU tomorrow, so you're going to be watching that game. Pretty interesting. If Santa Clara does pull off the massive upset, Santa Clara could conceivably enter a tie for second place in the WCC. With a loss, could fall to 8-5 and into a tie with San Francisco unless San Francisco plays tomorrow, which they don't. Their next game is Monday, so if you're looking at it if you're a Santa Clara fan, worst case scenario, you're tied for third with the Dons. That's what's going on in the WCC. Moving on to the Pac-12, and then I'll give you my pick. Pac-12, you have two teams playing. At 9 o'clock, we have Oregon, which is at 17-9, traveling to number 3, Arizona, which is at 23-2. Arizona favored by 13.5 points on ESPN. And at 9 o'clock, we have Washington, which is at 13-11, traveling to number 13, UCLA, which is at 18-5. UCLA favored by 17 points on FS1. So Arizona, with a win, obviously moves to 14-1 and would have a huge advantage over USC and UCLA, which are the next closest basketball teams. Oregon would love a huge win because they have not been doing well as of late. They obviously lost a huge game against Arizona State a couple days ago now, I think on Thursday. Would love to rebound from that one. With a win, can move to 11-5. USC does not play today, so they can't pass them, but you could get one game back in the loss column from them. If Oregon was to win their basketball game against Arizona and Washington was to upset UCLA, Oregon can move to 11-5 in conference, with UCLA falling to 10-5 in conference, and Oregon could pass UCLA for that third place. Oregon with a loss could fall to 10-6 in conference. Still not going to fall past Washington. Even if Washington does upset UCLA, they would move to 9-6 in conference. Now, if Washington was to lose their game, they could fall to 8-7 in conference and fall past Colorado, which has suddenly become the second hottest team in the Pac-12 with a 4-game winning streak to get back into the spot. If Washington was to lose the game, obviously you would fall to 8-7. Still not as bad as Stanford's 8-8, but again, would pass below the Buffaloes. That's what's going on in the UCLA. I just went over with a win, can move to 11-4 in conference and into a tie for second place with USC. USC does have the tiebreaker, however, with overall record at 22-4. UCLA would have an overall record at 19-5, not having nearly as 3 less wins as USC and 1 more loss as USC. So obviously USC holds a tiebreaker there, but you would at least get it there if you're UCLA, and you can hope someone helps you out in the future. Anyways, that's all the games we have with the ranked matchups. So who does GGB think is going to win? I'm gonna go with a safe bet. I know it's kind of actually, I'm going to go with the unsafe bet. I was thinking about taking Texas over Texas Tech, but I'm being a risky man here today. I'm going to take Xavier to upset UConn. They already upsetted them once a couple weeks back. Now, you could argue UConn probably more prepared for this matchup. They're not going to underestimate Xavier, but they probably shouldn't have underestimated Xavier last week. They were 25th team in the country. You were the 24th team in the country. It's not a huge difference there, but the Musketeers have played well against UConn. They kind of need this win if they want to get off the bubble, and I think they pick it up. So give me the Musketeers to upset the Huskies. Everybody, this is GDB saying adios, amigos. Go Musketeers.